Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring the Azuma, the previously tier 10 IJN supercruiser that has been moved to tier 9. Now before I get into the ship, I wanted to highlight that I've recently hit 60,000 followers on Twitch. And this is amazing and I'm very grateful to you guys. So in honor of that, on the upcoming Friday I will be hosting a big giveaway on my Twitch channel, basically just giving away a ton of premium ships regardless of what region you're from, EU, NA, Russia, whatever, Asia, I don't care. Just gonna be giving away a lot of goodies this upcoming Friday in celebration of hitting this milestone. Anyway, moving on to the ship itself. You might have noticed that I'm very angled, yet the Massachusetts just citadeled me and also got a full pen on me, so I just ate something like, what, 17k damage this angled? Now you might be thinking, what the hell? Like, was that maybe really unlucky? Was that a glitch? What the hell is going on? Like, the Massachusetts isn't exactly known for its gun accuracy or being that scary. It's the secondaries that are scary about it. The main guns, sure, not really compared to the North Carolina. And then we look at him and we realize he's actually reloading his front guns and he's shooting his front guns at us. And this is when it starts to dawn on us. 27k damage. In angled like this, very far away from a ship that doesn't even really rank among the really scary high tier ships. I mean, when you add in ships like Montanas and also Yamatos, ships like that into the mix, Massachusetts main guns aren't really the most terrifying thing you're going to face. Yet he just easily did 40k damage to our angled ship from that distance. And this is kind of what I wanted to start by highlighting on the Azuma, the issue with the survivability. Now you might be thinking maybe that was some sort of one-off case or just a very specific example, but it really isn't. In this case, if you look at the minimap, you might see a 3 de Grosse that is 14.5 kilometers away. Well, he just shot us for over 30,000 damage. Straight through our nose or straight through our deck armor, straight through our upper belt armor. It doesn't really matter because all of the armor can get overmatched. So that's two examples of 3 de Grosse and the Massachusetts, neither that are exactly known for having the most terrifying main guns in the game, let's be honest here. But both of them easily took half or more of my health at very far distances while I am significantly angled to any incoming fire. And that is why in the upcoming commentary you will understand why I like to play this ship very safe and quite carefully, because the ship does not tank well. Now, that does not automatically mean that you can never play aggressive in the Azuma. That doesn't mean that you're always forced to play safe. The problem is, you usually have to be exceptionally careful when doing it. In this case, I've been basically biding my time for a long time until the battleship. There was a Montana in their spawn. I've been biding my time for a long time for the Montana to move away. Because you can imagine when those battleships can do that, you can imagine what a Montana does to this poor ship. It ain't pretty. But if you do find these gaps, if you do find these openings, and Azuma pushing a flank is kind of terrifying. Well, for everything really besides the battleships. It does struggle when you have to go nose to nose in a straight fight against the battleship because, well, you have no real torpedoes, you don't have any armor to mitigate his shots, and your pen kind of struggles to get citadels on BBs. If they give flat broadside at very close ranges, sure, but it's kind of limited. Exceptions being Yamato maybe. But if you do manage to pull this kind of ambush off, you might have noticed in chat I told my team push, because I'm rushing in. If you do push this kind of if you do pull this kind of ambush off, the firepower of the ship is terrifying. It is not a fun ship to pop up on your flank. But the thing is, pulling off this kind of stuff is usually very difficult because, well, the lack of armor, the lack of mitigation against any sort of battleship AP, and then the fact that you don't really have any tools against destroyers, because for some reason Wargaming decided that out of all the large cruisers, out of all the so-called super cruisers, the Azuma should have neither hydro nor radar. Now apparently there's no hydro because it's supposed to be vulnerable to DDs, but they completely neglect the fact that the Alaska, the Kronstadt, the Stalingrad, all these other super cruisers, all of them have access to radar. You do not. So when a DD smokes up, well, you just better hope and pray for the best and hope that he doesn't get that perfect torpedo volley in. I have to angle because I'm afraid of incoming shells. I also hope that by changing my course maybe I would have thrown him off. but I don't really have any tools to deal with this. I'm hoping for the best. He does a really good prediction, and we're gonna eat some torpedoes. Our torpedo belt isn't really much to brag about, so we lose a massive chunk of health. Now, we're still gonna get him killed, of course. Our plane is in the air. I popped it preemptively to get vision of him, and he's shooting and all this. He doesn't really have much chance of outrunning these fast guns, but it does show you just how limited you are in your actions in this ship. Pushing DDs, pushing BBs, any sort of pushing type of gameplay is always dangerous in the Azuma. And that's why the playstyle automatically tends to lean towards a fairly safe, a fairly passive, a fairly long-range type of gameplay, because you can't do much else. Now, let's move on to some actual gameplay. The main selling point of the Azuma is naturally the 310mm guns, arrayed in a familiar fashion of 6 guns in the front, 3 in the back, so very classic setup. These guns are very good. The dispersion is satisfying and very consistent, and that's mostly thanks to the ship being given cruiser dispersion on these massive shells, unlike any of the other large cruisers. While you might lack the improved pen angles of the Alaska or of the Stalingrad, the AP is still very solid and your dispersion is better. With the reload mod, you can cut the reload down to, well, 17.6 seconds, which is okay-ish, but the Azuma's issues are certainly not threat. It can deal a lot of damage. It is a scary ship to have on the other side. The penetration is also very good, allowing you to Citadel cruisers at, well, practically all ranges. The HE also hits extremely hard. 5.1k base alpha, combined with the consistent dispersion, this thing really does feel like an oversized Zao at times, capable of lobbing that hard-hitting HE with a 27% fire chance at a target. The lack of reload, of course, means that you're not quite as good at starting them. Add in the caliber though, and you realize that this ship actually has an HE pen of 51mm, meaning you can consistently damage the likes of, well, pretty much all the tanky ships. Stalingrad, Moskva, Groskorfors, even the Kabas 50mm side plating can be penned by this HE. The shell velocity is 836 meters per second across both types of ammo, so it's very easy to switch back and forth, but as you can see, it is scary. You will find yourself using both quite often. The HE is so strong that there's really no reason not to actively switch to it when there's an angled target, because once again the lack of improved pen angles means that you struggle to get hits in otherwise. Oh, and then we get trolled by the dispersion right after. Anyway, the turret traverse is very sluggish for a cruiser or large cruiser, whatever you want to call it. It's 35.6 seconds with expert marksman. And this can limit your ability to switch between targets quite a bit. On the other hand, the 19.1 kilometer range with the added spotter plane means that you have great flexibility across all ranges. The issue is, of course, that, well, the ship is fantastic until people start shooting at you. That's when suddenly the Azuma goes from absolute top tier to youch, I have to run away. Now, the reasons for this are multiple. It's not like the ship is slow. It does 34 knots without the flag. The issue is more a combination of many things: size, lack of armor, and just general clumsiness. The Azuma is huge in size, and more importantly, its citadel is also huge. I'll show it awfully in port later in the video, but the early examples that I demonstrated probably gave you a pretty good idea of just what kind of citadel this ship has. The ship is also entirely coated in 25mm armor. The previous 30mm plating, it had got nerfed to 25mm when they moved it from a tier 10 ship to a tier 9 ship, which means pretty much all forms of AP overmatch you. Everything from 380mm and above can ignore your armor, aka overmatch it, and so even this Gneise now that we're shooting at right now can easily overmatch our armor plating and deal huge hits to us. It honestly feels kind of absurd to have so much health and size, yet you're kind of forced to play so scared. To put it into perspective, even the Ibuki, the Ibuki, the ship that is pretty much considered the ultimate paper armor cruiser, even the Ibuki has patches of 30 and 32mm armor in its midsection, like the forward mid deck is 32 on that thing and it's got upper belts of 30. So this thing is literally more lightly armored than what the Ibuki is. So, because it's so large as well, it also turns like a brick. Even with running the 1 million rudder shift module, only gets the rudder shift down to 11.1 seconds. And even worse, the turning circle is a gigantic 920 meters. Once again, to put it into perspective, the Musashi, that's basically the Yamato clone at tier 9, has a turning circle of 900 meters. So yes, you have a 20 meter worse turning circle than one of the biggest battleships of the same tier. So this means that the ship is very punishing to any sort of mispositioning or any sort of overextending, because it's so dangerous to turn out. Making that massive 920 meter turn in front of enemy ships is pretty much guaranteed to get you deleted, as because your Citadel is also gigantic. Having to reverse, if you, whoops, I went too deep, I have to reverse nose in, doesn't protect you from much damage either, because once again, 25mm armor, everyone overmatches you. So this is the combination of stats on the ship that forces it into this passive role. You have so few escapes if you go too deep, if you misposition too deep. You have a huge size, a huge citadel, a huge turning circle, a sluggish rudder shift, and no armor. It's not exactly a flattering combination if you want to do any sort of aggressive play. If you do make aggressive play, like I did earlier in this vid as an example, you have to do an all or nothing, and it has to be very carefully calculated that there's nothing there that can really deal with you. But if you do make that play, you have to commit. You have to kill the enemy before they kill you, because once you're committed, there's no turning out, there's no running away. Now, the concealment helps a bit. As you can get the detection down to 11.9 kilometers with the full stealth build, that's concealment expert, the camo, and the module. The plane spotting, even with that build, is however still 10.9 kilometers, which means in carrier games you are spotted very frequently. And of course, the complete lack of radar means that DDs can keep you lit throughout the game without you having really any way of dealing with them. Naturally, the lack of hydro, combined with the large size and the bad handling, means that you're also a rather juicy torpedo target for them. Now, the torpedo belt does mitigate 22%, which is quite good for a cruiser. Not that good for BV, but good for a cruiser. But that's not really going to be much of a consolation when they hit you. That does massive pens from battleships. Like, angling feels like it does so little in this ship because you have so little armor to actually angle against the incoming fire. Now, the health pool of 58k does look very impressive at first glance, until you compare it to something like the Kronstadt that actually has 71k health. Somewhat amusingly, Kronstadt isn't exactly considered to be a particularly agile cruiser, yet the Kronstadt actually has pretty much identical rudder shift. I think it has like 0.8 seconds slower rudder shift, but more importantly, Kronstadt turning circle is 840 meters, whereas yours is 920. So not only does it have the health advantage, it also has a significant maneuverability advantage. There are other trade-offs, of course. It has worse concealment, 800 meters worse concealment, and of course it doesn't have anywhere near your dispersion. That's really the Azuma's bread and butter, is that very, very impressive dispersion. This game, well, it's certainly still doable. It's just becoming very hard, because, well, you don't really want to push in. I have to play careful against everything. The CN Young, no Hydro to deal with these incoming torps. Turning my guns, hoping I can catch him if he's gonna actually come around this corner, which it appears he is. That pinpoint dispersion, though. If you do manage to catch DDs off guard, if someone radars a destroyer and you get to bring these big guns to bear, that pinpoint dispersion on that hard-hitting HE it deals massive damage. It absolutely deals massive damage. So this thing is very much a gun platform. It's a squishy gun platform with no real torpedoes and not much protection or agility or much of anything, but the guns are great. It's sad that you can't really use them in all the opportunities you would like, but I guess that's why they want, well, it would need to be a tier 10. For those that are wondering, wait, why is this ship suddenly tier 9? I thought you loved the old tier 10, and I actually did love the old tier 10 Azuma. I liked it a lot more than this one, because that thing actually had a bit more armor plating, so you could actually play a bit more aggressive, since it had some form of protection. The issue is Wargaming wants to release something called the Yoshino, which is basically going to be the T10 Azuma. It's going to be their IJN tier 10 large supercruiser, whatever, and that thing will have torpedoes as well. So they moved this one to tier 9. Now, the Azuma is already going to be free XP? Yeah, they already announced Azuma will be free XP, the Neostrashimi is going to be steel, and that upcoming tier 10 Yoshino, the upcoming tier 10 Azuma supercruiser, whatever, that thing is going to be coal. So if you want to start saving up coal for that thing, well, probably a good time to start now, because I have no idea how expensive it's going to be. But if they're adding in a tier 10 premium cruiser, like supercruiser, I would assume the coal price is going to be extremely hefty. Free XP wise, the Azuma, I have no idea about the cost. Was it 1 million? Alaska is going to be 1 million, wasn't it? So it would make sense that the Azuma would also be 1 million. Of course, the obvious question people are going to ask, Azuma or Alaska? Well, kind of different playstyles. The Alaska, of course, has that 27mm armor plating, which means it doesn't have to be so afraid of everything, because it can actually bounce 380mm AP. So it has much less to fear. Also, Alaska has a radar, which will get, I think it will get buffed in the normalization as well. Don't quote me on that, but I think they were buffing at that radar range to 10 kilometers, which will obviously help the Alaska a lot more as well. So Alaska will play much less afraid of pretty much everything, even cruisers in fact, because you can't angle that well against the Alaska because it's got those improved AP pen angles, so Alaska is so good at dealing with enemy cruisers. It will be less efficient against farming battleships, of course, because, well, Azuma HE is so good, especially with the Dispersion. But the ability to radar DDs means DDs will be less likely to just keep it perma-spotted, keep it hunting down. Which one? Different playstyles, I would say. The Azuma will, or the Alaska will be more akin to the classic heavy American cruiser playstyle. A lot of island hugging. You can play it in the open water thanks to its, well, it does play quite well in the open water, but generally you probably want to be around islands, you want to be using that radar, you want to be positioning more around islands where you can peek out your nose and blap ships and so forth, whereas the Azuma is very much a long-range cruiser. Very safe play, very long range, afraid to really pick fights. If you commit, you have to go all in. Different playstyles, both ships are very good. Now, don't get me wrong, I've criticized a lot of the things on the armor and survivability on the Azuma, but let's not forget that for a tier 9 cruiser, it's still really, really good. It's absolutely a good ship. 310mm guns with cruiser dispersion, yes, it is very powerful. You also got an example of the AA there, but honestly, I have a hard time really trying to sell or comment too much on the AA right now, because I feel like Wargaming are constantly tweaking the values and constantly changing it because the CV rework was just released. As of right now, I think Azuma AA is actually quite good. I haven't had too many issues shredding planes that have come from me. It's been pretty good at it. But then there was at one point a hotfix where a midway dropped me and I struggled to shoot down any planes. So how good is the AA? I would say it's probably really good against tier 8. It's probably going to struggle a bit against tier 10. If that's going to change in the upcoming patches, hotfixes, whatever, I have no idea. So when it comes to AA, we're going to keep that kind of as a blank slate. I doubt anyone buying the Azuma will be buying it, or anyone getting this ship will be getting it for the AA values anyway. The reason to get the Azuma is these big guns. That's the selling point of this ship. 310mm guns, that with cruiser dispersion. That's a pretty good selling point. The problem is, of course, it's not very kind against any sort of tanking. I didn't mention a lot of battleship AP melting you, but I do have to highlight another thing that is obviously also going to be brutal, and that's Harugumas and Kitakazes. Since you have no hydro, no torpedoes, no radar, you don't really have a single way of dealing with Haruguma Kitakaze or Daring or basically any of these HE spammers. So if one of those DDs park up, smoke up in front of you and start farming you, well, you're gonna eat a ton of damage. You're gonna turn away and get citadeled, or just hope you can get undetected, or whatever. Regardless, it's not gonna be a fun time. In fact, all HE spammers are very, very strong against this ship, for obvious reasons. 25mm plating doesn't really protect against HE at all. Wooster especially loves farming the Azuma. Just the DPM just melts this ship. I'm focusing quite heavily on the Musashi here, in case you're wondering why am I not rushing the Shokaku. And that's because my team has kind of been sitting on C this entire game. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but my team has been, for some reason, they've just been stuck there all match. And I'm afraid that this Musashi will literally just sail there and kill them all. So I'm trying to support them as much as I can. And there goes the first ship down. We really need this kill. He might just go there and kill my Lexington as well. I'm switching to HE. Once again, 51mm pen, not quite enough to pen the deck armor of that Musashi. It's 57, but I do want to get some fires going on him. I do want to get some incoming damage on him at least. Popping my heal because I'm afraid of the incoming damage that will come from this guy, as I mentioned. Armor, not one of the strengths. If you want to avoid damage, you literally have to dodge it. You can't tank shells in this thing. He gets one hit, it's obviously a full pen, but it should not be enough to get me killed, and I get a fire on him. If I can get a second fire, that's guaranteed the Musashi dead. At least my carrier should have an easier time of dealing with him now. That pinpoint dispersion is fantastic, and of course the fire chance is 27%, which is very high. So that guy is absolutely going to burn to death. I dodged the volley, and now we're just going to run. Because killing him should finally flips the score into our favor, 810 to 805. The carrier needs to kill me in order to have any chance of winning this game. 30 seconds left, but I pop defensive AA to start shredding these planes, and I of course turn in towards them to mitigate the chances. One of the torps arms on my nose, but I have my damage con ready, and it's not going to be enough to kill me, and he can't really get a second strike off with only 12 seconds remaining. And this struggle of a game actually ends up being a victory in our favor by what, 24, 25 points. Yeah, probably a bit too close for comfort on this one, but a win is a win and I will happily take it. 237k damage, 4 kills, 5 citadels, even got a cap, shot down a bunch of planes. Basically a very strong showing from the Azuma. Then again, we were top tier, so kinda to be expected. I of course got no achievements because this ship is still a work in progress. It is not finalized. Team score wise, 2.8k base, I will take it. But yeah, when you're top tier like this, you're also expected to put in a lot of work. And Azuma is, well, it's not quite as strong as some other cruisers, I would say, in this tier. Like the Alaska, when you're top tier, you can also bounce a lot of AP. This thing, you don't really bounce much. Like I on my stream, I celebrated when I got to face a Scharnhorst, simply because I actually got to nose in tank AP, which is something you get to do so rarely in the Azuma because, well, there's no real armor to tank with. Detailed report wise, HE, 100,000 HE damage plus a witherer worth of fires. A huge chunk from it, but that's not to say that the AP was in any way useless. You saw the blaps we did on their cruisers in the early games, and short range AP against battleships and just AP against cruisers is fantastic on this ship. 1.7 potential, most of it avoidance. In fact, if we look at the damage received, that really highlights the complete lack of armor. I got a total of 21 AP shells hit me, 21. And these did 66,000 damage to my ship. Yeah, you don't want to even try to tank shells. You just want to avoid them. And that's just the kind of sad state of the Azuma. Avoidance is much better than angling. And if you don't have any armor, that's just the way it works. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. Right, as usual, I will start off with the modules. Not really much to talk about here, there's not much you can change. There's really no consumable difference, you can't switch out anything, you're pretty much locked in. I would recommend getting the premium damage control first, because the Azuma of course has that extended fire duration that large cruisers have. It makes sense in my opinion on a ship like the Stalingrad that can actually tank the HE, but on the Azuma it's just another form of vulnerability. So damage control absolutely, followed by heal, after which spotter plane or defensive in whatever order you wish. Spotter plane probably more useful and generally has a longer cooldown, so you might benefit more from having that one. Upgrade wise, turret survival, rudder survival, better AA. Now you can run both Dispersion or better AA, but I think the Dispersion is so good that the benefit of the percentage isn't really that high, so I prefer the improved AA, because as I mentioned, the AA is actually quite good. You throw out a large chunk of flak and making it even stronger is not a bad idea at all. Rudder shift, there's really not much point running propulsion in my opinion, because you don't really want to be sitting, well, you don't want to be in situations where you're forced to use it. The damage control, not worth it, you're eating massive pens more than anything else, so rudder shift to try to dodge is probably the best in slot upgrade here. Concealment, and finally faster reload on the main guns, because well, they are your bread and butter. Captain perks wise, priority target, you need to know if people are shooting at this thing. AR, in fact on this ship though, maybe you might want to even get expert marksman before you get AR, because as I mentioned, the turretverse is very sluggish for a cruiser. AR is generally such a fantastic skill though, it's hard to not recommend taking it first. Superintendent, additional heal, yes please. Concealment expert, and I really like fire prevention because of that huge fire duration that you have on these large cruisers, and especially considering how squishy it is, and the fact that if you get set on fire your concealment goes out the window, and if you really need to disengage then, well, less chance of being set on fire is pretty damn useful. On fire your concealment is 13.9, which isn't exactly fun to deal with. After that we have expert marksman. Expert loader, because being able to switch ammo type often is very important in this ship, and faster damage con. Once again, the fires, the fires, the fires. That's why we want to use it. Flag wise, you don't really benefit much from the fire chance flags because your fire chance is already 27. It's a very small benefit there. I'm running a detonation flag. This is mostly because I've been testing the ship and I don't want to detonate while testing. Not really necessary on a cruiser in general. I would like to see fire extinguishing time flag, India Yankee, and improved heal and faster consumable cooldown. These three are very good. Then you can mix in speed and AA if you so choose. The rest can absolutely be economic flags. Now, the camo you're seeing is the premium camo that it has, because it's IJN. You can actually switch between two. This is the second one. Both of them, honestly, look pretty good. Anyway, I did promise you guys to show the Citadel and Armor layout. And yeah, here we go. 25, 25, 25, 25, 25. The torpedo belt is 25, but you do have Citadel Armor behind it. 25, 25, 25. You might be noticing a certain pattern here. Yep, your entire armor scheme is complete paper. The superstructure is of course even more thinly armored. And to of course add insult to injury, as I mentioned, the Citadel is gigantic. It extends very high above the water. It is large, easy. The armor isn't really that impressive at 178 millimeters. I think in comparison the Kronstadt, what was the Kronstadt armor? Kronstadt armor is 230. Oh yeah, and it's got layered armor, doesn't it? Wait, let me see this. I think it had layer armor, didn't it? Yeah, of course the outside is 230 and then it got 90 on the inside. So the Kronstadt, and of course this thing has waterline Citadel. So the Kronstadt in comparison is significantly harder to get any Citadels on ever. Double layered armor, waterline Citadel, all these things, and in comparison the Azuma is of course, well, gigantic Citadel, much more thinly armored. the comparison is pretty obvious, just how squishy this is. Even though both of them have 25mm armor, it's not just the HP pool that separates them from each other in survivability. The Kronstadt is hard to Citadel, the Azuma gets Citadel when you sneeze at it. That is really the big difference in these two. Anyway, that was my preview of this upcoming ship. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope it helped you make up your minds on whether or not you want to play this ship. Feel free to join in on Friday for my huge giveaway. 60k followers on Twitch. Going to be giving away a bunch of premium ships and other goodies. If not, well, I still appreciate all of you guys taking part in my YouTube channel. You guys are awesome. Anyway, have a great rest of the week, and I will talk to you guys later.